I'm Isabella Rivera, 19 years old, and I earned a full scholarship to Stanford after growing up in a house where ambition was treated like betrayal. For years, I held my family together, raising my siblings, skipping sleep, working shifts after school, just so everything wouldn't fall apart. But when my mom burned my acceptance letter in front of me and said, "This family needs a maid, not a scholar," I made a decision that changed everything. Have you ever felt erased by someone you gave your whole self to? If you have, drop your story in the comments. I promise you're not alone. Before I take you through what happened, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to reclaim your life from someone who tried to keep you small, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about choosing yourself, even when it costs everything. Because what happened next, no one saw coming. I used to think my mom was the strongest person I knew. She worked nights at the hospital and cleaned houses during the day. There was always a second-hand coffee thermos in her purse and an extra set of keys looped on a rubber band around her wrist. She never sat still, never took a sick day. When people asked how she did it, she'd just shrug and say, "You do what you gotta do." There were three of us, me, my younger brother Louis, and my baby sister Cammie. Louis had asthma. Cammie didn't sleep through the night until she was almost 5. Our dad left when I was 9, and after that the world got very small very fast. I remember learning to microwave formula by the time I was 10. I could time diaper changes around commercial breaks. By 12, I could make boxed mac and cheese without the instructions. Nobody taught me. I just figured it out. That's what you did in our house. You figured it out, and you didn't complain. School was the only place that ever felt a little quieter. I liked that it had rules, structure. If I studied, I got good grades. If I kept my head down, teachers liked me. I used to stay late just to be around the order of it: chalkboards, folders, neatly stapled homework packets. One of my teachers in middle school noticed. She gave me extra books, let me help grade spelling tests. I think that was the first time I realized I was good at something outside the house. At home, I didn't talk about school unless I had to. If I came home excited about a paper I wrote or a test I aced, my mom would nod without looking up from the sink. Once, I brought home a certificate for perfect attendance and put it on the fridge. The next morning, it was gone. I never asked why. As I got older, the gaps between me and everyone else started to stretch wider. In high school, I was placed in all honors classes. I joined the debate team. My guidance counselor encouraged me to apply for summer programs. I found one at a university 2 hours away, free, full scholarship, focused on science and engineering. When I told my mom, she stared at me like I'd just said I wanted to join the circus. "And who's supposed to watch the kids?" she asked. I thought maybe Louis could. "No, Louis is 13. I dropped it. The brochure stayed folded in my drawer for the rest of the summer. Still, I kept going. I studied late at night after Cammie fell asleep. I took the SATs with no prep courses, just borrowed books from the library and practiced during my lunch breaks. I brought home report cards with straight A's and put them on the counter. My mom never picked them up. She didn't stop me from succeeding, exactly. She just didn't participate. Like if she ignored it long enough, it would stop being real. When I got a part-time job at the grocery store down the street, it wasn't for spending money. I bought my own school supplies, paid for my college application fees, and still came home to do the dishes. There were nights when I'd stay up until 2 a.m. studying, only to wake up 4 hours later to get Cammie dressed for school. I kept telling myself it would pay off eventually. Stanford wasn't on my radar at first. Not because I didn't want to go, but because it felt too far away from home, from reality, from what people like me did. But my AP English teacher pulled me aside one day and said, "You need to think bigger." She helped me write my essay, proofread every draft. I sent it in, thinking nothing would come of it. The day the email came, I was alone in the school library. I clicked the link twice, thinking it might be an error. When the page loaded and I saw "Congratulations," I stopped breathing for a second. I walked home in a daze. I didn't tell anyone right away. I waited until dinner. We were eating boxed pasta and canned green beans. The TV was on in the background. I waited until there was a commercial, then said it quickly. "I got into Stanford." Louis looked up, "Like the Stanford?" I nodded, full ride, tuition, housing, everything. My mom kept chewing. "Mom," I said, "did you hear me?" She set her fork down, wiped her mouth with a napkin. looked straight at me and said, "So what, you're just gonna leave? Who's gonna take care of things around here?" I was too stunned to respond. She pushed her chair back and stood, walked to the sink. "You think you're better than us now?" "No," I said, "that's not. We don't need some big fancy college girl around here, acting like she's too good for laundry duty." Louis was staring at his plate. Cammy had no idea what was going on. I didn't say anything else. I just went upstairs, sat on my bed. The acceptance letter was still open on my phone. I stared at it for a long time. That was the night I realized something I hadn't let myself believe before. My mom didn't want me to leave. Not because she needed me, because if I left, she couldn't control the story anymore. Couldn't say we were all in this together. Couldn't keep pretending I was just another version of her. It wasn't jealousy, exactly. It was ownership. She thought I owed her my life because she gave me one. And in some ways, I agreed. I just didn't realize how much until that moment. Before the letter, there were other moments, small ones, that should have warned me. I didn't think much of them at the time. Just figured she was tired, stressed, dealing with too much. I made excuses for her like it was a second language. The first time I brought up the SATs, I was proud. I'd studied on my own for weeks, late nights with borrowed prep books, scratch paper, and an old calculator missing the 7 key. I got a 1510. When I told her, I expected at least a nod. Instead, she raised her eyebrows. "Don't act like you invented the alphabet." That was it, no good job. "No, I'm proud of you." Just a dry remark, then back to folding laundry. I remember wondering if maybe she didn't understand what the number meant. But when I explained it, she said, "So what? That gonna pay the electric bill." I let it go. Then there was the summer research program I got into the year before Stanford. Fully funded, STEM-focused, with college credit. It was 2 weeks away at a campus 3 towns over. I told her it would look good on my applications, that I could get there and back if she just gave me a ride the first day. She didn't even read the brochure. "Sounds like a waste of gas," she said. "And don't expect me to cover for you while you're off playing scientist. This family runs because of you, remember." That line stuck. I didn't push after that. I emailed the program director and said I had to decline. It didn't stop there. Around that time, she started telling people I was off chasing some fantasy while real life happened here. I'd hear her on the phone with her sister, laughing about how I was too good for chores now, or how I was gonna get all educated and forget where she came from. Sometimes she said it like a joke. Sometimes she didn't. She had this way of talking about me like I wasn't even in the room, like I was already gone. My siblings picked up on it too. Louis stopped asking me for homework help. Cammy stopped crawling into bed with me when she had nightmares. There was this shift, subtle but constant, where I started to feel like a visitor in my own home. One night, I came back late from a study group. The lights were off, the door was locked, and my key didn't work. I knocked for 10 minutes before my mom opened the door in her robe. "You think you can come and go whenever you want," she said. "I told you I had a study session." "It's 9:30. I stood there, holding my backpack, trying not to look as tired as I felt. She stared at me like I was the problem. "This isn't a hotel." I walked in and didn't say anything else. She locked the door behind me. After that, I started to realize it wasn't just about me going to college. It was about me changing. And in her mind, that meant I was rejecting her. Every time I learned something new or made a decision without asking her, it was a personal betrayal. There was a moment in October. I remember it because I had just submitted my college applications. I was sitting at the kitchen table filling out FAFSA forms. She glanced at the papers and asked, "What's all that?" "Financial aid stuff," I said. "They need income info." She grabbed the paper out of my hand and scanned it. "Why are they asking about me?" "Because you're my parent." She rolled her eyes. "I didn't sign up for any of this." I kept filling it out anyway. She didn't give me the tax forms I needed, so I had to ask a teacher how to request them from the IRS. When I finally got them, she said, "All this just to leave us behind." There was something mean about the way she said it. Not angry, mean, like she wanted it to sting. I told my counselor, Ms. Reeves, about some of it. Not everything, just enough for her to get the picture. She asked if things were okay at home, and I said, "They're fine. My mom's just practical." She gave me a long look. Smart girls from small towns usually learn early when not to rock the boat, she said. But you're allowed to want more. It doesn't make you disloyal. It was the first time someone had said that to me out loud. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear it. But back home, nothing changed. My mom had this way of cutting off conversations before they started. If I mentioned college, she changed the subject. If I brought up deadlines, she asked why I couldn't just go to the local community college and live at home. Free room and board, she said, seems like a smart choice to me. When I told her Stanford was offering a full ride, she shrugged. You think I'm impressed by fancy names? I don't think it was about the school. I think it was about control. If I went to Stanford, she wouldn't be able to watch me, steer me, correct me. She wouldn't be able to remind me that she was the reason I had anything at all. And maybe that scared her, or maybe it just pissed her off. I started noticing other things. She would go through my backpack, ask questions about where I'd been, who I was with, why I needed to stay late after school. If I didn't answer the right way, she'd get quiet. Ice cold. You don't tell me anything anymore, she said once. You've got secrets now. I'm just busy. Right, too busy for your family. It wasn't true. I still made dinner 3 nights a week. Still picked Cammy up from school. Still helped Louis with his inhaler schedule. I was doing everything I always did, just with more pressure piled on top. But that didn't matter, because in her eyes I'd already left. The more I tried to prove I hadn't, the more she twisted it. I remember this one night. We were watching TV, and a news segment came on about a girl from our state who got into Yale. My mom scoffed. Look at her. She's gonna go all the way to some big city and forget who she is. Probably come back in a few years thinking she's too good to say hello. I didn't say anything, I just watched the screen. She looked at me. That reminds you of anyone? It wasn't subtle. And what hurt the most wasn't even the way she spoke to me. It was the way Louis started echoing her. Don't forget about us when you're rich, he said one day. I laughed thinking he was joking, but he didn't smile. You always have your nose in a book, he added, like you don't even live here anymore. That's when I realized how easily my mom had convinced them that I was the one leaving them behind. Not that I was doing something hard and scary and worth supporting, but that I was abandoning them. For prestige. For selfishness. The house felt different after that. I still slept there, still cleaned up after dinner, still took care of everyone, but I wasn't part of the team anymore. I was the traitor. And the worst part, I didn't even know how to explain what I was doing, why it mattered, why I had to try. Because I wasn't chasing fantasy. I was trying to survive. The envelope was thick, one of those big ones that didn't bend. My name was printed neatly on the front. I knew what it meant the second I saw it in my locker. Stanford didn't send rejections in oversized envelopes. My hands were shaking when I opened it. The pages were crisp and clean, printed on heavy paper. I skimmed until I found the words, full scholarship, admission granted, welcome to the class of 20. I don't even remember the year now. Just how my chest felt tight with something between relief and disbelief. I wanted to run laps around the school, scream in the hallway, tell someone, anyone, that I'd made it. But I didn't tell anyone at school, not right away. I wanted her to be the first to know. I walked home faster than usual. The letter was tucked inside my notebook, safe like something sacred. I kept reaching back to check that it hadn't slipped out. When I walked through the front door, she was sitting at the kitchen table, flipping through a grocery store flyer. There was a pot on the stove, something bubbling low. Cammy was on the floor drawing with markers. Louis wasn't home yet. I stood in the doorway, waiting for her to look up. Hey, I said. She kept flipping the flyer. I got something today. Did you pick up the cereal? I hadn't, I was too excited. I'd forgotten. I got a letter from Stanford. Now she looked up. What do you mean? I got in, I said. Full ride, tuition, housing, everything. She stared at me for a second, then blinked. You serious? Yeah, I opened my notebook and pulled out the letter. I held it out, trying not to smile too hard. Here, you can read it. She didn't take it. Instead, she stood up, walked over and plucked the paper from my hand. Then she walked to the kitchen sink, turned on the tap for a second, turned it off, and reached into the drawer next to the stove. I heard the sound before I saw it, matchsticks. She struck one, lit the corner of the letter, and held it over the sink. "Mom." She didn't even look at me. Just let the flame eat the edges, let the paper curl and blacken and fall in pieces into the basin. "You're not leaving," she said. "This family needs a maid, not a scholar." I stood there, frozen. Cammy was still coloring. She didn't look up. The flyer rustled slightly from the fan. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. Something inside me just disconnected. She turned back to the stove, like nothing had happened. Stirred the pot with one hand, humming under her breath. I went upstairs. My backpack was still by the bed. I pulled it open and started packing whatever made sense: textbooks, socks, toothbrush, my phone charger. A few crumpled bills I'd tucked away from work shifts. I wasn't even thinking clearly. I just knew I couldn't sit at that dinner table like everything was normal. The bag was too heavy. I had to sit on it to zip it. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't even care. I came back downstairs an hour later. She was serving food onto chipped plates. Cammy was in her booster seat. Louis had come home by then and was setting out forks. Nobody looked at me. "I'm staying at Ms. Reeves's for a few nights," I said. She didn't respond. "I'll be in touch." Louis glanced at me, then looked away. I opened the door and stepped outside. The air was cooler than I expected. I walked half a block before I realized I hadn't brought a jacket. That night, I slept on a pull-out couch in Ms. Reeves's guest room. I didn't tell her everything, just enough to explain why I couldn't go back home. She didn't ask questions. She just handed me a blanket and said, "Get some rest, we'll figure it out." I stared at the ceiling most of the night. I kept thinking about how quiet it had been at the table, how easily she burned something I had worked years for, like it was a receipt, like it didn't matter. The next morning, I woke up early and walked to school before the bell. I used the library printer to pull up my acceptance email and print a new copy of the letter. It didn't feel the same. The paper was thinner. The ink was a little too light, but the words were there, still mine. I forwarded it to Ms. Reeves just in case. She said she knew someone in admissions, that if I needed help talking to the university, she'd back me up. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but I nodded. I didn't want to lose it again. Over the next few days, I stayed at her house. She didn't push. She just gave me space. Sometimes we ate dinner in silence. Sometimes she'd ask about classes or homework, but she never brought up my mom. Word got around school, not the whole story, just that I'd gotten into Stanford and wasn't living at home. A few teachers congratulated me. A few didn't say anything. At lunch one day, Louis came and sat next to me. He didn't have a tray. "Mom says you're being dramatic," he said, "that you faked the letter to get attention." I looked at him. "You know that's not true." He shrugged. "She says you made it up. She said they wouldn't want someone like you anyway." That one hit harder than I expected. "Do you believe her?" He didn't answer, just stood up and walked away. The next day, my phone rang while I was walking between classes. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Hi, is this Isabella Rivera?" the voice asked. "Yes." "This is Dr. Keller, the university president at Stanford." I stopped walking. "I heard from a colleague that you might be having some difficulties confirming your enrollment." I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. "We just wanted to reach out directly and let you know your scholarship stands. Your spot is confirmed. And if you need help transitioning out of your home situation, we can assist with that." I don't remember what I said, just that my voice shook and I was grateful no one else was in the hallway. Later that afternoon, I gave Ms. Reeves the number. She talked to them, helped me start the process for early housing. The university had a program for students in unusual circumstances. That's what they called it, unusual. Back at home, my mom was telling anyone who would listen that I'd snapped, that I was running away from responsibility, that I was disrespecting her by pretending to be something I was. But I didn't care what she said anymore, because now someone else believed me, someone powerful, someone who mattered. The part that stuck with me, what I couldn't shake, was how fast she destroyed it. No hesitation, no discussion, just flame. She knew what that letter meant, she knew how hard I'd worked, and she still burned it. That was the betrayal, not the words, not the cold shoulder, not even the lies she told afterward. It was the match. She looked at my future, and decided it was inconvenient. And then she lit it on fire. Ms. Reeves let me stay for the rest of the week. She had a guest room with a twin bed and a shelf full of old paperbacks. The sheets smelled like lavender. There was a desk with a lamp, a door I could close. I didn't realize how much I needed that until I had it. She didn't ask for an explanation, just said, "Stay as long as you need." I helped with dishes and fed her cat. I tried to keep quiet to take up as little space as possible. Old habits. I spent a lot of that time trying to understand what had just happened. My mom burning the letter hadn't been a snap decision. It wasn't some outburst she regretted later. She made a choice. And the choice was clear. I was a problem, not a priority. I kept replaying all the times I'd helped out at home. Every early morning spent making lunches, every evening folding laundry while studying for midterms, every sick day I skipped so I could babysit Cammie when the sitter canceled. All the birthdays I let pass without asking for anything. All the excuses I made for her. I used to think that being useful meant I was loved, that if I kept doing more, she'd finally see me. But now I was starting to realize it was never about seeing me. It was about keeping me in place. Ms. Reeves made a few calls. She talked to the admissions office and confirmed what they'd told me, that my offer still stood, and they were aware of students with complex family situations. She printed out another copy of the letter. We put it in a folder. She told me I could take steps to move into early housing once the term started. "There's still time," she said. "You haven't lost anything." But it didn't feel that way. It felt like something had cracked, not just between me and my mom, but in me. Like I'd finally seen a version of the truth I couldn't unsee. I didn't go back home that weekend. Instead, I stayed up late on Saturday and wrote down a list of everything I had done for that house over the last year. Grocery lists, doctor's appointments, school pickups, utility payments I covered from my paycheck, chores I handled without being asked. I stopped halfway through and realized I wasn't even writing it to prove anything. I just needed to see it. I needed to remind myself that I hadn't imagined it, that I had given something real, and it had been dismissed like it meant nothing. Sunday night, my phone buzzed with a message from Lewis. "Mom says come home, you've made your point." I stared at it for a long time, then put the phone down. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a command. Like I was a machine that had glitched and needed to be reset. On Monday, Ms. Reeves told me she'd spoken with the school counselor, and they could help me apply for independent status for financial aid. It wasn't guaranteed, but there were ways to show I couldn't rely on parental support. She walked me through the process. Every time I said thank you, she waved it off. "You earned this," she said. "You didn't steal it." I hadn't cried since the letter burned. Not when I packed, not when I left, not when I printed the replacement copy. But that sentence broke me. I went into the bathroom, shut the door, and sat on the floor for 10 minutes until I could breathe normally again. I kept showing up to school. I took my tests. I did my homework. People started whispering about me in the hallways. Some said I'd been kicked out. Others said I was lying about Stanford. None of it mattered. The only voice that still had weight was hers. She told everyone I was unstable, that I had delusions of grandeur, that I'd forgotten who raised me. I wondered what she told herself. Maybe she believed it, maybe she needed to. But it didn't matter anymore. One afternoon, I walked into the house while my mom was out. Ms. Reeves had offered to go with me, but I said no. I wanted to do it alone. I packed the rest of my things: clothes, books, some old notebooks. I found a box under my bed with photos and little mementos, birthday cards from when I was a kid, a medal from a spelling bee in 5th grade, a drawing Cammie had made with "You're the best sister" in glitter pen. I took that too. I didn't take anything that didn't belong to me, not even the headphones I'd bought for Lewis, not the jacket I knew Cammie had borrowed. I left my house key on the counter. On my way out, I stopped in the hallway and looked around once more. Same chipped tiles, same humming fridge, same quiet resentment in the walls. It wasn't mine anymore. That night, I moved into a temporary dorm on Stanford's campus. It was early, but they'd made an exception. I shared the suite with 2 other students from difficult backgrounds. One girl from Fresno, another from Detroit. We didn't say much at first. We didn't need to. The first morning I woke up there, I heard birds outside the window. Real quiet. No yelling, no banging pots. No one calling my name to come wipe something or fix something or explain something. I lay there for almost an hour, just listening. Then I got up, made tea in the common room, and opened my laptop. I had an orientation packet to fill out, a student ID to pick up, an entire future waiting. I kept thinking about something Ms. Reeves had said before I left. Your mom doesn't get to decide your worth. You're not an extension of her survival. She was right, but it was going to take time to unlearn it. Because I had lived my entire life trying to be helpful, to earn peace through usefulness, I thought if I carried enough weight, people would treat me with care. But some people don't want partners. They want proof that they're right to feel bitter. And when you stop playing that role, they don't just resist, they retaliate. I wasn't angry, not yet. I wasn't even sad. I was something else. Something that looked like distance, like finally letting the silence fill the space she used to occupy. The truth is, I didn't leave because of the letter. I left because I finally understood it was never going to be enough. Not the grades, not the chores, not the sacrifice. To her, I was useful, until I wasn't. And that was the deal I'd been living under without knowing it. Now I did. After I moved into the early dorm housing, things settled into a rhythm. I still had weeks before the semester officially began, but the university gave me work to do, orientation prep, paperwork, housing forms, some light administrative tasks they let us help with in exchange for meal credits. It wasn't glamorous, but it was calm, predictable. I was assigned a student mentor named Jess. She was a senior from Sacramento who had come through the same early arrival program. We met once a week in a windowless office with a chipped desk and a whiteboard no one used. You'll have to talk to financial aid, she said, pushing a folder across the desk. You'll need proof of your independent status, which usually means court documentation or a letter from someone in authority. I don't have court anything. Okay, she said, like that was just another variable. Then someone like a teacher, counselor, pastor, someone who knows your situation. I thought of Ms. Reeves immediately. I called her that night, and without hesitating, she said yes. I'll write the letter, she told me, and I'll send them the documentation. You don't need to worry about that part. When the email from financial aid came through, confirming the update to my status, I sat on my bed for a long time staring at it. It was official. I didn't need my mother to sign anything. I didn't need her tax returns. For the first time in my life, my progress didn't depend on her permission. I didn't call to tell her. Instead, I made another call. It took me a while to work up the nerve. The number was in one of the emails Stanford had sent after I first got in. It belonged to someone in the admissions office, Deborah Hastings, assistant director. When she picked up, I introduced myself. I told her what had happened, not everything, just the key parts. I said the original letter had been destroyed by a family member, that I was now in early housing, that I needed to make sure my records were still intact, my scholarship secure, and my enrollment unchallenged. She was quiet for a second, then said, "We understand. This happens more often than you'd think." I didn't expect that. She said she'd make a note on my file, that everything looked fine. Then she asked, "Would it be helpful if someone from the university contacted your family? Sometimes that diffuses tension." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the idea of my mother speaking to anyone at Stanford was so absurd it felt like a movie plot. I said, "She answers unknown numbers, especially if she thinks it might be a debt collector." 2 days later, I got a call. It came in the afternoon while I was folding towels in the dorm laundry room. I didn't recognize the number. I stepped outside to answer it. "Hi, is this Isabella Rivera?" "Yes." "This is Dr. Keller, the university president." I leaned against the wall. "I just wanted to reach out directly," he said. "I understand there's been some difficulty with your family situation. First of all, let me say how impressed we are with your resilience. And second, we'd like to offer our support as you transition into this new phase." He didn't talk down to me. He didn't rush. He just laid it out. If I needed a contact for further documentation, they'd provide one. If I wanted them to speak directly with my parent or guardian, they were willing to do so. I told him I appreciated it, then I gave him my mother's number. "You're sure?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "go ahead." That night, I watched from the hallway of Ms. Reeves's house. I had gone back to pick up the last of my things, some notebooks, a jacket I left in her guest room. My mom didn't know I'd be stopping by. She still thought I was at school, finishing up exams. Ms. Reeves said she'd be at her house for about an hour picking something up from a neighbor. I waited on the stairs. At exactly 6:04 p.m., her phone rang. I recognized the sound of the ringtone from all those nights she used to work the night shift and kept it turned up loud in case of emergencies. She picked it up, didn't look at the number first, just answered. "Hello." She paused. "Who?" Another pause. I saw her go very still. "Stanford," she repeated, quieter this time. I couldn't hear what they said next, but I saw the way her mouth tightened, the way her free hand gripped the edge of the counter. Then, without a word, she hung up, put the phone down gently, walked to the bathroom and closed the door. I waited a minute, then another. I didn't hear anything, no crying, no pacing, just silence. I stepped outside before she came back out. Didn't want her to see me, didn't want to give her a reason to perform something. She never mentioned the call to me. I don't know what the university president said. I don't know if she responded at all. But after that day, something shifted. The text stopped. The second-hand updates through Lewis went quiet. The noise died down. She didn't call to fight. She didn't call to beg. She just stopped. A week later, I got a manila envelope in the mail at the dorm. No return address. Inside was my birth certificate, my social security card, and a note with 2 words. "You're welcome." No signature. It wasn't an olive branch. It wasn't forgiveness. It was an administrative gesture. But it meant one thing clearly: she understood I didn't need her anymore. Not for paperwork, not for permission, not for anything. And I think that scared her more than anything else. Because for years, her power came from being the one I had to ask, from being the gatekeeper to the world. But now the gate was wide open, and I'd walked through it without her. I kept the envelope in the drawer of my desk. I never responded. There was nothing left to say. A few weeks later, school officially started. Campus filled up. My roommates arrived. Classes began. Orientation happened. I put my head down and did the work. Every now and then, I'd think about what she said the day she burned the letter. This family needs a maid, not a scholar. She was right about one thing. I'm not her maid. And I'm not coming back. The rumors started before orientation even ended. A friend of Ms. Reeves told her my mom was going around saying I'd lied to Stanford, that I forged the acceptance letter for attention. She told neighbors I'd had a breakdown, that I was confused and making up stories because I couldn't handle pressure. Apparently, she even said Stanford had called her to say there'd been a mistake, and I wasn't actually admitted. The way she told it, she was the victim of a daughter who betrayed her, of a system that turned kids against their parents, of a school that didn't check its facts. But people started asking questions. One of the teachers I'd worked with on an extracurricular project emailed Ms. Reeves asking for clarification. A few others texted me directly to say congratulations. Someone must have sent around the link to my name on the Stanford early admit list, because by the end of the week, 3 more people messaged me just to say they knew the truth, and that she said some wild things. I didn't respond to any of it. I wasn't interested in defending myself to people who'd already made up their minds. But still, it was something to know the cracks were showing, that her version of the story wasn't sticking the way she wanted it to. Lewis texted me one night after midnight. "I saw the letter, the real one, in your notebook. I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long time before replying. I wasn't angry at him, not really, but I didn't know what to say either. We hadn't talked since that day at school when he told me I always had my nose in a book. I think part of him wanted to believe her. It was easier than believing he'd let it happen in front of him. "Thanks," I wrote back. "I'm okay." He didn't write again. I heard from Cammie a few weeks later through a voicemail. She was crying. She said she missed the bus, that mom was working and forgot to call a ride, and that she didn't know how to get to school. She was 9. Her voice cracked in the middle of the message. I listened to it twice, then deleted it. I had already made a decision not to be the one who fixed things anymore. I wasn't going to call my mom or book a ride or check in to make sure someone else stepped in. That was the hardest part, not because I didn't care, but because caring used to mean doing everything. And now, it had to mean doing nothing. A week after that, someone messaged me from a number I didn't recognize. No name, just a short sentence. She quit the hospital job, says she can't keep up. I knew what that meant. Without me handling everything at home, meals, rides, tracking appointments, she'd finally hit the limit. She used to say I made things easier, that I was reliable. I don't think she realized how much she depended on that until I was gone. I'd been holding up a system that looked like it functioned, but only because I kept it balanced on my back. And now, without me, it was collapsing. Meanwhile, I was figuring out how to live a different kind of life. I took a work-study position at the campus library. It wasn't glamorous, mostly shelving, data entry, occasional late-night front desk shifts, but it gave me structure. And for the first time in years, everything I did was for me. I wasn't staying up late to help someone else cram for a quiz. I wasn't budgeting my hours around errands or rides. I wasn't checking 3 calendars just to make sure everyone else was taken care of. I got up, went to class, clocked in, read my assigned chapters, ate dinner in the dining hall, and slept through the night. Nobody needed me for anything. And I didn't realize how much that weighed until it was gone. The first time I stayed in bed past 8 a.m., I felt guilty. Then I didn't. The second time I said no to someone who asked for help moving dorm furniture, I felt like I was being selfish. Then I realized I was just allowed to say no. I saw other students call home between classes, laugh on the phone with their parents, complain about their moms texting them too much or sending care packages with too many snacks. I didn't feel jealous. I just noticed the difference. No one from my family sent anything. No calls, no messages except the ones that came from guilt, never from concern. I had moved out and they had moved on, at least on the surface. One night in early October, I walked to the edge of campus, where the trail looped behind the science building. There was a bench there. I sat for a while, just watching the lights from the dorms flicker in the distance. And I thought about how much time I had spent trying to be enough for people who didn't know how to value anything that wasn't sacrifice. There had always been this unspoken rule in our house. The more you gave up, the more you proved you loved them. If you were tired, that was good. It meant you were doing your part. If you never asked for anything, that was even better. But now, I was starting to understand something I'd never been allowed to believe before. That love wasn't supposed to feel like a job. That you didn't owe someone your life just because they gave you theirs. And maybe, just maybe, love without strings didn't have to be earned. I started making a list, not a formal one, just in the back of my notebook, of things I wanted for myself. Not things I wanted to achieve, things I wanted to feel. Rested, safe, curious, unafraid to speak. It was small at first, then it grew. At work, I started talking more with the other student employees. There was one girl, Lena, who was studying political science and wanted to be a public defender. We'd shelve books side by side and trade stories about high school teachers and weird dorm neighbors. She didn't ask me about my family. I didn't offer. That was the kind of friendship I needed. I wasn't thriving exactly, not yet, but I was building something, quietly, on my own terms. A month later, I got a letter from Stanford's support office. They de-reviewed my independent status and finalized my aid package. It was more than I expected. Enough to cover summer housing. Enough to stay on campus year-round. I folded it carefully and taped it inside my closet door. Not to prove anything, not to show anyone. Just to remind myself, the worst had already happened, and I was still here. Still standing, still choosing myself even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. A year passed quietly. No drama, no phone calls in the middle of the night, no lectures about forgetting where I came from. Just classes, part-time work, early mornings in the library and late nights rereading my notes. It wasn't easy. I struggled, especially that first winter. I'd gone from being the smartest kid in a small town to just one of many in a lecture hall full of students who seemed born for this. They talked differently, walked like they belonged, knew what to say in office hours, how to build rapport with professors. I had to learn all of that on the fly. But I kept going, not because I was fearless, because I didn't have another choice. I knew what I'd left behind. I wasn't going back. Then, almost exactly 1 year after I moved out, something arrived in my campus mailbox. A small envelope, no return address, my name in block letters on the front. Inside was a birthday card. Generic, pale blue, with a glittery balloon on the front and a printed message that read, "Hope your day is filled with joy." There was no signature. Just a $100 bill folded into the shape of a paper star, taped to the inside. I turned it over twice in my hands. I knew where it came from. No one else folded bills like that. She used to do it for Louis and Cammie on their birthdays, sometimes 5s or 10s, slipped into cereal boxes or wrapped in socks. It was one of her things. A little effort instead of a real conversation. I sat with it for a while, then I picked up my phone. I didn't call because I wanted to talk. I didn't miss her. I didn't feel a wave of forgiveness. I just didn't want silence to feel like permission to rewrite history. She answered after 2 rings. "Hello." "It's me," I said. "I got the card." A pause. "Yeah, thought it was time." There was no warmth in her voice, but no sharpness either. Neutral, like she was holding back until she could gauge where I stood. "Thanks," I said. "It was unexpected." Another pause. "So how's school?" "Hard," I said, "but I'm doing fine." "That's good." We sat in silence for a few seconds. Then she cleared her throat and said, "I wasn't sure if you'd pick up." I didn't answer that. Instead I said, "Well, that's all, just wanted you to know it arrived." She said okay, then hung up. That was the first time we spoke in almost a year. Since then, we talk every couple of months. Not much. Just enough for her to feel like she hasn't lost all connection, and for me to remember that connection doesn't mean closeness. She never apologized. Not for the letter, not for the lies, not for the silence that came after, and I stopped expecting her to. I think, in her mind, she didn't do anything that required apology. She was protecting what she saw as hers, her household, her control, her version of how life should go. She thought she was making sure I didn't outgrow her. But I did, and now the terms are different. I don't visit, she hasn't asked, I don't send gifts on holidays. If I'm home in town, which is rare, I let her know with a polite text. Sometimes she replies, sometimes not. What's changed is me. I don't carry her expectations anymore. I don't flinch when I see her name on my phone. I don't pause before answering questions about my family in group settings. I just say, "We're not close," and leave it there. Because I spent years thinking I owed her closeness, that it was the price of being cared for. That if someone raised you, fed you, clothed you, kept the lights on, you had to trade everything else in return. Your voice, your goals, your right to say no. But I know better now. And the truth is, we'll never be what we were. There's too much distance and not enough honesty. But I don't need a perfect relationship to feel like I've healed. I need boundaries. So that's what I said. No guilt. No leverage. No conversations where I'm expected to explain myself again. If she wants to rebuild anything, she knows where to start. And I know where I stand. That's enough for now. It's been 5 years. Sometimes that number feels too big to be real. Other times, I catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror, clean blazer, university ID lanyard around my neck, and I remember exactly how I got here. I graduated from Stanford with honors. Not top of my class, but close enough that it mattered. I stayed an extra year for a Master S in education policy. I wanted to teach, but I also wanted to understand the systems that keep kids like me from believing they can ever get out. Now I'm a lecturer at a small university about 30 minutes from the town I grew up in. Not Stanford, not Ivy, but solid, respected, the kind of school where kids come in unsure and leave with something clear in their hands. I like it here. The campus is small enough that I know the janitor's name. My office window looks out onto a courtyard where students sit on the grass between classes, earbuds in, always moving. I teach first-year writing, intro seminars, occasionally upper-level composition. I try to make space for the kids who sit in the back and never raise their hands, because that used to be me. The ones who show up early and stay late, but always say they're fine when you ask how they're doing. I know the signs now: overprepared, undersupported, good at everything except asking for help. Sometimes, after class, a student lingers, pretends they're just curious about an assignment, but you can tell something else is underneath. They'll mention their mom, or a job they can't quit, or a little sister who depends on them. And I don't share my whole story, but I say enough. You don't owe anyone your future just because they gave you your past. It usually lands. I don't drive past my old house often, but when I do, I don't stop. I don't need to. The last time I saw it, the siding was a little more weathered. The lawn still overgrown in patches, a different car in the driveway. Maybe she sold it. Maybe she's renting a room out now. I don't know, I don't ask. Louis moved out a while ago, joined the Navy. From what I heard, we text sometimes. He sends one-word updates mostly. Safe, fine, graduated. Cammie's in high school now. She follows me on Instagram but never likes anything. I don't take it personally. I think she's still trying to figure out what version of me is true, the one she grew up with or the one she's piecing together now. Maybe both, maybe neither. My mom still tells people I almost went to Stanford. I heard that from a cousin at a wedding once. She said it like it was a joke. You know how your mom is, always rewriting things. I just smiled, it didn't bother me. Because I don't need her to tell my story anymore. I lived it. I left, I stayed gone. I built something that lasted. Not because it was easy, but because I made a decision, over and over again, to keep going, even when I was tired. Even when it was lonely. Even when it would have been simpler to turn around and go back to being what she needed instead of who I was becoming. There's no dramatic ending here. No confrontation, no courtroom showdown. She never stood up at my graduation. Never sent a card when I got my job. Never said she was proud. And that's fine. Because I learned something better than forgiveness. I learned peace. I make my own money now. Live in a quiet apartment with a balcony that gets just enough sun in the morning. I have plants I keep alive. Students who ask for advice. Colleagues who don't know anything about my past unless I choose to share it. Sometimes, when it's late and I'm cleaning up my lecture slides or grading papers, I remember the sound of the match lighting. The way she didn't flinch. The way I didn't either. I used to think justice meant proving her wrong. Now I know it just means continuing to live well. Sometimes justice isn't loud. It's not vindictive or flashy or final. Sometimes, justice is waking up every day in a life you built for yourself, one that no one can take away, rewrite, or burn. That's enough. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever had to walk away from family to protect your future, I want to hear from you. What was the moment you knew it was time to go? And how did you rebuild after? Drop your experience in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear they're not alone. More true stories are coming soon.